I'm Lisa Evers, and this is Street Soldiers.
Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
It's been about 5 years since the tragic death of Eric Garner at the hands of police. While his family continues to fight for justice, I sat down for an exclusive one-on-one interview with Police Commissioner James O'Neill to find out what's really changed. The disturbing final moments of Eric Garner's life on July 17, 2014 were captured on video that's been seen all over the world. His death from a banned police chokehold sparked outrage and protests and increased tensions between the NYPD and the community. During my exclusive interview in his police headquarters office, the commissioner tells me much has changed.
We knew we had to get a connection to the community. We had to establish relationships first, and then keep developing those relationships to keep everybody in a safe.
All police officers went through de-escalation and crisis intervention training. Body cameras are now worn by all officers on patrol. But the foundation of change was built on O'Neill's innovative idea of neighborhood coordination officers, or NCOs.
Now we're up and running in all 77 precincts. We're up and running in all the housing PSAs. We're up and running in all the transit districts.
O'Neill says at its core, it's a crime-fighting strategy that incorporates the community, and the numbers show it's working.
Crime continues to go down, specifically violence. Shootings, homicides, overall crime continue to go down.
Daniel Pantaleo is still on the police force on modified duty since he was never charged by the state or the federal government. O'Neill tells me his status with the NYPD should be known by the second or third week in August.
With Officer Pantaleo's trial, it finished up in June, and now it's with Deputy Commissioner Trials, and I'm waiting her decision to be able to make my final decision.
For the Garner family, the last 5 years have been a time of personal grief and a series of dead ends on their journey for justice. But Garner's daughter Emerald says she will continue her fight to see that Officer Pantaleo is fired from the NYPD.
You could say it was an accident, but you still need to be held accountable.
Right.
If somebody dies in my custody, it is my responsibility. It is my accountability that needs to come forward. You did something wrong, you have to be held accountable. And that's just what the bottom line is for me.
There are still many questions in search of answers. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is Phillip Hamilton. He's a civil rights and criminal defense attorney and former Bronx defender. Phil, great to have you with us again.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Also with us is Emerald Garner. She's the daughter of Eric Garner, a mother of 3, and an activist on her father's behalf. Emerald, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Also with us is Dr. Darrin Porcher. He's a criminal justice professor, former NYPD lieutenant, and law enforcement expert. Dr. Porcher, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And also, I just wanted to give you a quick note. We did invite the NYPD to send a representative to be on the panel. They were unable to do that, but as you just saw, they did offer me a one-on-one interview with Police Commissioner O'Neill. But let's find out now what our panel here in studio has to say about all of this. Emerald, first of all, thank you very much for being with us at this time. We really appreciate it. And as you know, our condolences, remain, and prayers for you and your family. You came on Street Soldiers right after this happened to talk with the community, to urge people to be calm in the face of the shock and just the grief that so many people were feeling. How is your family doing now, and how are you doing now?
Oh, right now, sorry, I lost my voice.
I know, just come close to the mic and then
but we're doing okay. We're holding on. We're fighting the fight, and I'll be on the front lines every day. As I said, we're on day 9 of 11 days of action.
And you're also doing this while you're working and also raising your child and your sister's 2 kids.
Yes, I'm a full-time administrative assistant for a foster care agency, and I have the 3 children. My own daughter, who suffers with ADHD, and I also have my sister's 2 children.
And Erica, rest in peace to Erica.
And rest in peace to Erica.
And you have her on the show. So where do you get the strength from? Because I know your grandmother, Gwen Carr, we've seen many times. She said she has faith in a higher power. Where are you getting your strength to maintain throughout all of this right now?
Therapy has been a help for me. I suffer with a lot of mental health issues, as did my sister.
As a result of this?
As a result of everything, I've been in therapy. The children are in therapy. It's very hard to go through it without talking to someone. I text you all the time. I text everyone who's been there since the beginning. So just talking it out is mostly my therapy.
Darrin, when you look at what's happening now, 5 years later, because that was also when you first came on to Street Soldiers, where do you think we are right now with this? Because a lot of people say, okay, nothing's really changed. Other people say, you know what, this decision, when is the family going to see some kind of justice?
I think we have seen some changes. When we go back 5 years ago, the primary push for the NYPD was quantitative statistics. Police commanders were held accountable to the statistics in decreasing crime in their particular precincts. Staten Island was no different. So when we look to the regression of the enforcement or agencies, I should say agencies, the enforcement units, such as anti-crime units, things to that effect, a lot more plainclothes units were in play back at that time during the incident with Mr. Garner. Now the NYPD is moving more towards the police and community relations. You have the NCO program, community policing, etc. So you have seen a reduction in the number of civilian complaints as a result of that. But we still have, it's an arduous task, and we still have a lot of work that needs to be done. Case in point, when we look at what happened just over this last weekend, where we had the officers that were doused with water, that clearly echoes a harbinger for police and community relationships.
And we're going to get into that.
To a better place.
We're going to get into that. But let me talk about the Garners' fight for justice. Phil, when you heard recently, this is the day before the 5th anniversary, the family is called in to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn, the federal offices there, and told that after all this investigation and the FBI and the video and everything that they looked into, that there would be no charges against police officer Daniel Pantaleo, who was the one we all saw in the video putting Eric Garner in that, what Police Commissioner Bratton called right off the bat, an illegal chokehold. What happened with that?
I mean, I'll start with saying I wasn't surprised when ultimately I saw that. When we talk about what happened with that, the Justice Department just decided that they were not going to move forward with bringing federal civil rights charges against Officer Pantaleo. Now, clearly we know that the Staten Island grand jury a while back had declined to bring charges, so the question was whether or not federally was the DOJ going to move forward. And there's been some changes in administration, Jeff Sessions, Loretta Lynch, and now ultimately William Barr. What happened was, the headquarters in Washington actually was recommending moving forward with charges, but the local prosecutors here, federal prosecutors here in the Eastern District of New York, were saying that they didn't want to go. Ultimately, William Barr, who's the head of the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, decided that they weren't going to move forward with the charges because, one, they felt as though they could not ultimately prove Officer Pantaleo guilty of, beyond a reasonable doubt of using objectively unreasonable force. And then secondly, even to the extent that they could have proven that, they felt as though they would have had a weak case in proving that he willfully intended to, take Mr. Garner's life and violate his federal civil rights. So that's ultimately what happened. The decision was made pretty much at the 0 hour because the statute of limitations on the federal charges ran 5 years after his death.
Oh, the death. So that's why it was the day before, because some people interpreted that as this is a total disrespect to the family. But you're saying they waited till the last possible minute, and then this is what happened.
They did. This decision could have been made years ago, just to be frank, even throughout differing administrations, but it just wasn't. It was kind of pushed to the back end. That then had collateral consequences in terms of the city, right? When we talk about the CCRB, they didn't initially bring charges because they wanted to wait and see what the federal government was
It seems like
gonna do.
everybody's waiting for everybody else.
Everybody was passing the buck basically until the last minute, and really at this point the only kind of forum we have left for accountability is this departmental trial that Pantaleo just pretty much finished up, and we're waiting on a decision right now from the Deputy Commissioner of Trials,
Right.
and then
we're-
ultimately Commissioner
what the
O'Neill.
recommendation is about whether or not he's still in the job. But let me come back to that day. Emerald, it's the day before the 5th anniversary of your father's death. The videos are out again. You're exposed to the videos again. There's a lot of people, everybody's calling you. You're out there. You're called into the U.S. Attorney's Office. You walked out of that because you were so upset. Tell us how you found out that you were going to hear that decision then and what the decision was.
So we were called to a round table. An article was released an hour or two prior to us even getting to the building. And someone pulled up the article and said, hey, this was just released. Is this true? So I'm like, I'm just listening.
And the article said,
The
you're talking
article
about...
said that the federal government will not press charges against
Right.
Pantaleo.
Right.
So when they came in the room, it was like, nice to meet you. And I'm like, it's not nice to meet you. I need confirmation. Are you going to file the charges or you're not? He said, we're not. So I said, the meeting is done. What are we going to say and talk to? Or I want to give my condolences. I've heard that for the past 5 years. I don't want to hear condolences anymore. I said, you guys intentionally waited. I said, we could have did this a week ago. We could have did it 2 weeks ago.
Right.
You skillfully, disrespectfully made that decision on the day before the anniversary.
Did you have hope? Did you and
did-
your family have
no.
hope, like over the last couple years, that maybe the federal government would come in, like they did with the way back in the '90s, the case with Anthony Baez, who
That's what we were
football hit
expecting.
the police car in the Bronx, and Officer Francis Lavoti was found not guilty, was not indicted by the local DA, but the federal government pressed charges against him, and he actually went to jail.
After my sister died, I lost all hope because she died waiting for a decision from the Department of Justice. She died not getting justice. So after she died, all hope died with her.
And you were expecting it, but you weren't expecting them to treat you the way that they did.
Absolutely. I wasn't expecting you to wait till the day before. Day before the statute of limitation ran out to tell us that you're not going to make any charges. And then to release a statement before you talk to the family, that's ultimately disrespectful.
All right, this is Street Soldiers. We'll be right back. Darrin, when you hear how the family was notified, and you've been in the media, do a lot of commentating, that for a newspaper article to appear, people have had to have more than an hour's notice to put together a lengthy article. For that to come out an hour before the family was even notified themselves, what do you think of that?
I mean, I think that's a miscarriage of justice in itself. The article preempting what happened with them, I think it was an atrocity, to say the least. What should happen in a situation like that is there should have been a casualty officer that exercised the human factor, that actually sat down with the family and just kind of hashed out, this is what we have. And then once the family understood what was going to take place, then that's when the press release should have occurred. Unfortunately, the reverse happened, and what it does is it now exasperates the situation for the family, because we take in consideration we have a loved one that was lost in the process of a police altercation.
So that was a pretty big leak, and a pretty early leak.
Right. It's unfortunate, and just, one of the things is, I just mentioned the human factor. We're all human beings, and so whenever you lose, the loss of a loved one is catastrophic to the family members. So we don't have one victim, we have several victims. We have the person that lost their life, and we have the family as well. So going back to that, whoever the casualty officer was that managed that particular situation dropped the ball.
Dropped the ball. Emerald, for you and your family, going through, like, you sat in every day there during the NYPD departmental trial, emotionally, are you feeling just frustrated? Because your grandmother, Gwen Carr, said this is not over, but a lot of the options, a lot of the doors have closed.
So right now, I didn't really announce that I was going to be at the trial because I didn't want to make it about a media spectacle. So that's why I didn't make any comments or anything. The trial was disrespectful itself. The Pantaleo side was just, it was just disrespectful. Everything since 7/17/14 has been nothing but disrespect. So it's like, we sat through a trial, we watched the video, no charges on the criminal, no charges on the federal, no charges on the local. So it's like, what are we to do now? Except we're waiting for him to be fired, and it's like he should have been fired 5 years ago.
And I want to talk about that, but
Yeah.
Phil, first give us just an overview. What are the legal options when something like this happens?
I mean, the legal options were kind of as you just sent through them. I mean, ultimately, you remember Donovan, who at the time was the district attorney of Staten Island, tried to, have Pantaleo indicted, but the grand jury back in 14 decided ultimately that they weren't going to do that. They didn't indict him on any charges. So that pretty much is why he was able to walk with respect to the criminal realm. Then, as we just discussed, in terms of the federal civil rights violations, the DOJ had the opportunity to bring those charges. They ultimately decided that they were not going to. As I said, I was not surprised. Do I think that ultimately they could have moved forward on those
do you
charges?
think, because you're in federal court all the time?
They absolutely could have. And I think systemically what you have a lot of times is, from a prosecutorial standpoint, I feel as though the way that the system looks at officers in these situations is different than when they just look at general, people on the street, right? General civilians. And I think the decision that was made ultimately not to charge him, to the extent that that's going to be the platform, I just wish sometimes that both the U.S. Attorney's Office, the local prosecutorial offices would use that same discretion with a lot of the clients that I represent.
In your opinion, from your experience in federal court, Eastern
Absolutely.
District, Southern District, did they have enough evidence to convene a federal grand jury?
Yes. I mean, the evidence comes from the video. Now, what ultimately the grand jury decides to do with that, you got to kind of look at it no different than the grand jury in Staten Island. It's their decision ultimately to make.
Coming up, what would the Garner family consider to be justice? It seems that in a lot of cases, not just this case, but a lot of cases, anything can be interpreted any way depending on how skillful the person doing the interpreting.
I just want to interject.
I'm
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, to think of the state of someone's mental health, whether it was his intention or not to kill Eric Garner is still dead. So whether he was intentionally killed or accidentally killed, you could say it was an accident, but you still need to be held accountable.
Right.
If somebody dies in my custody, it is my responsibility. It is my accountability that needs to come forward. You did something wrong, you have to be held accountable. And that's just what the bottom line is for me. Because we can say that he's never encountered Eric Garner before, but it was never released that he has arrested Eric Garner before. That there was a roundtable talk about Eric Garner where his picture was displayed and they had a discussion about what he does. So they know exactly who he was. They knew who we were on Staten Island. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, they know who my mom is, they know who my brothers were. We're not hard to miss. We're all 6 feet and taller. We're not hard to miss. As they say he was a big man, we're all big people. So whether it was his intention or not, you still did something wrong, you should still be held accountable.
And I think that's
And
what
what is accountability to you at this point? Because the only question mark left, it seems legally, is this departmental trial decision and the disciplinary hearing. What would be justice for you, for your family?
So
at
I mean,
this
for
point?
justice for me would be not having another Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, or Sandra Bland, to not have the police continuously kill us black people. And I kind of, in my feeling, in my gut, through the streets, heard that he's going to be fired but still keep his pension. That's going to be another spit in the face. So right now, I have no hope. I don't think that O'Neill is fair. I don't think that de Blasio's fair. I don't think anybody is fair. I don't think the judge will make the right decision. And that's just how I feel. It may not be how everybody else feels, but I've been spit in the face multiple times in the past 5 years. So justice for me means stop killing us. Justice for me is losing your job without keeping your pension, without keeping your perks, because your pension is your perk. That's what you get after you serve and you protect and serve the community. He's not a protect and serve kind of person. He has multiple disciplinary CCRB complaints against him. Multiple. There's over 10. I've worked at 311, so I know exactly how the process goes for CCRB. So it's like, you know, I'm not gonna go through the gray area anymore. It's black or white. If you terminate him with his pension, that's still disrespectful. You terminate him without it, that would be, he should have been terminated 5 years ago.
We got to wrap things up here. We're running out of time. But so you're basically saying you think things are better.
It doesn't.
One step forward, one step back.
It doesn't feel like 2010 anymore in terms of like being that
2014,
hot, or
right.
2014, that kind of era. So I guess if I look in the last 5 years, if I'm going to give the city any bit of credit, it doesn't feel that hot. So I'll give you some credit. It feels a little bit better.
But more work to be done.
More work needs to be done. I think that's exactly where I was trying to go with it, Lisa.
Okay, Darrin, final word. What do you think? Better or worse?
Short
answer.
I think we're in a better place, but we need to strive to continue to get to a better place, because if we gain a level of comfort where we are, then that's when we're going to have problems and we're going to regress to where we were in the early 90s and the late 80s.
All right, Emerald, I'm going to give you the final word on this. Do you think we're in a better place aside from what your family is going through in the tragedy as a society, or do you think we're just not, things have gotten worse?
I think that they haven't gotten worse, but they haven't gotten better, and we still have work to do.
And how far do you and your family plan to continue to fight for justice for your dad?
Until I'm going like my sister.
All right, I want to thank you for being with us. For Street Soldiers, Attorney Phillip Hamilton, thank you so much. Emerald Garner, thanks for being with us. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. You talked with us in 2014, right after this happened, and we appreciate you coming in to talk with us again about where you're at and where your family's at. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Darrin Porcher, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers. I'm Lisa Evers. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. Let's push for peace.